This is the Galaxy A34 5G. I think it's trying to be like the A54, but it had to cut some corners in order for it to stay cheaper. But how well does it do that? Let's find out. The most glaring cut corner has to be the notch at the top. It's one that the A30 series has clung to for a while now, and although I understand why Samsung is doing this, it is weird to see anything other than a hole punch cutout on a phone at this price point. Like, they can actually put a hole punch on this, but if they did, how would you differentiate this from the A54? Especially because the display specs are somewhat identical. AMOLED, 120Hz, 1080p resolution, 1000 nits of peak brightness, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, like these are pretty respectable specs. So even though that notch is atrocious by 2023 standards, the quality of the display kinda makes up for it. Or at least that's what I think. Size is also different this year. It's now bigger at 6.6 inches, which to some might be a good thing and to others might mean it's now a two-handed phone. So even with the notch, the display is still solid. It's even an upgrade from the A33 thanks to that higher refresh rate. Another somewhat noticeable cut corner would be the plastic back. I reviewed the A54 before this, so going from that glass rare to a plastic one was very noticeable. The A34 felt cheaper, but although glass is set to be more premium, it is definitely more susceptible to cracks if it falls. But with a plastic back, you have a better chance of surviving a fall with a couple scratches. And when I did put a case on this, that cheap feeling did go away. So at the end of the day, it's not that bad a sacrifice, especially because the A34 still retains that Galaxy flagship look. From the rear, this is hard to distinguish from the A54 or even the S23. So we've got that floating camera design, except the rings are much shorter, so they don't protrude as much as the A54. But then again, once you slap on a case, it could be any Samsung phone. The plastic back was a bit of a turn off, but the matte finish is definitely a W. And just like the A54, the build quality on this is solid. It's very sturdy. It also has an IP67 rating for dust and water resistance. It also has 3 mics, 2 speakers, the bottom one does the heavy lifting, a Type-C port for charging, no headphone jack, it's never coming back. Then the power and volume buttons on the right side, and a microSD/SIM card tray at the top. It's a hybrid SIM tray, meaning you either have 2 SIM cards and no SD card, or 1 SIM card and 1 microSD card. Just like the A54, this has an optical under-display fingerprint reader. It's not the fastest, but it works really well. This also kind of goes unnoticed, but the haptics on this, as well as the A54, were pretty good. At the end of the day, the plastic rear isn't that big a deal. What about the cameras? Well, this has a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. Photos look okay. At times it looks over-processed, and other times it gets it right. So a little inconsistent. It does handle the skies really well though. Colors for the most part are accurate, but sometimes they are a bit exaggerated or oversaturated. But overall, for the most part, the images you get out of this are pretty good. The only thing is sometimes it does give that over-processed look, so I can't really trust this to take a good photo every single time. Chances are it might be a MediaTek 1080 problem, because Izzy pointed out in his own video that he noticed the same issue on his Redmi Note 12 Pro Plus 5G, which also uses the MediaTek 1080 chipset. But with cameras being mostly software these days, I wouldn't be surprised if this gets sorted out with a software update. This shoots up to 4K 30 frames per second on both the rear and selfie cameras. The footage looks really good and also really stable to me. But for even smoother video, you can turn on super steady modes, but then resolution drops to 1080p. I would love to know your thoughts on the photos and video taking on the Galaxy A34. But yeah, at this price, this is definitely up there in terms of photo and video quality. As mentioned earlier, this has the MediaTek Dimensity 1080 chipset with 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. This appears to be the only spec available, or at least here in Nigeria. My biggest problem with the predecessor, the A33, was the overheating issue. Like if you try to do any sort of multitasking, it would start to heat up, so hot that you could literally fry an egg on it. Okay, that's not true. Anyway, I wanted to see if they had sorted that issue out, so I did a lot of multitasking and gaming, and I can report that the A34 stayed moderately warm through all of that. And it also performed really well. Like, I could have multiple apps open and running and the phone would smoothly juggle between all of them. I also think that the higher refresh rate display played a part in making the phone feel fast, because it was super responsive. It feels just as fast as the A34, and games just as well too, and in some cases better than the A54. I think that's down to more games being optimized for MediaTek compared to Exynos. Overall, I was left really impressed with the A34, and they definitely didn't cut any corners here. And you can say the same about software. This is running One UI 5.1 based on Android 13. And just like I mentioned earlier, navigating the phone, multitasking, all the animations involved in all of that were buttery smooth. You also get all the customization features, the 4 years of major Android updates, all of it. What about battery life? Well, this comes with a 5000 mAh battery, which honestly lasts an entire day with light to medium usage. If you really want to kill it in a day, you can, but if you're doing an hour or two of gaming, social media here and there, watching a couple episodes of your favorite show, this would last you well enough till you get home to a charger. So that's the A34 5G, and it costs 236,000 here in Nigeria, or about $300. And to answer the initial question raised, Samsung did a really good job with the A34. As a successor to the A33, this feels like an upgrade, or should I say, refinement. The new design makes it look really polished, the overheating issue has been resolved, and performance is buttery smooth. And then when you put it side by side with the A54, this kind of feels like a better deal. Not the better phone, but the phone that gives you more value for the price that you're paying. So that's my Galaxy A34 review. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you when you see me.